Welcome to Business Raw. I've got another episode for you and amazing guest, Paul Rivens. Paul, huge welcome.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it.
Yes. So Paul is an amazing entrepreneur who started from very humble background, not knowing anything about business, falling into entrepreneurship, building and failing and going through all life navigation in property specifically, but also he used lots of power and tools of psychology to create his own success. And when I talk about lemons, I always say like life throws lemons at you. Well, I just lost count how many lemons life was throwing at Paul. And today is certainly the episode all about business raw. And of course, roaring success as a result. Paul, huge welcome. Can you please describe yourself for our audience, who you are, what do you do, and listeners for that matter, who never met you before?
I'm Paul Rivens. I've been in the property game for nearly 40 years. I was a baker when I first left school and uneducated. I knew by the age of 23 I needed to do something different. So I managed to get myself into a estate agency. So my first 10 years in the property game was via estate agency in the 1980s and 1990s. During the 90s, I went through quite an acrimonious divorce and I needed time to spend with my kids. So I went self-employed and I had a few clients that used to come to me and say, "Have you got any deals? Let's do some deals together." And I was really good at finding deals, property deals. And one of the guys said to me, let's do a joint venture. I did a joint venture with him.
Started as a result of you going through divorce and then wanting to spend time with kids, being more flexible. So that was the only way for you.
Yeah, that's it. So and then we had one deal that went wrong. We threw it in auction to try and get rid of it, thinking we're going to lose some money, and it made a lot of money going into the auction. And then we found this little formula and we've been doing it ever since. So people are aware I buy houses that are unmodernised. I chuck them into auction and I sell them for more money. And that's all I do as far as property is concerned. I'm not a landlord. I've had numerous other businesses, mortgages, estate agency. I've got a prop tech company that I'm setting up at the moment. So that's really a little bit about me, really.
Brilliant. And I know you've been in business for over 40 years now, right? So you're quite seasoned entrepreneur. And I know throughout that time, there was lots of lemons or challenges coming through your way, which I think now actually shaped and form into what you do and maybe progress from just being entrepreneur, having into mindset. But before we're going to do that and talk about the mindset, let's rewind back. And I guess the question I want to find out, like you started this business, you on a high, right? What was the first challenge that you encountered that maybe shaped to the man who you are now in that journey?
Well, in business, if I go back a bit, so at school, I was the kid that was at the back of the class. It was acting up terribly, got kicked out of the classroom, got slippered by the headmaster. But what they didn't realise was I was severely dyslexic. So I couldn't read and write properly. And it wasn't until I was about 35, I did a test for dyslexia and I had the reading and writing age of a 7-year-old at 35. So it was difficult for me to do admin and stuff like that. So I went into baking bread because my father said to me, if you get into food, clothing or housing, you'll never be skint. You'll always find a job. I didn't have at the time, the capacity to get into property at the time. And I had a job in the bakery on a Saturday because I was always working when I was a young lad before I left school. I had 3 or 4 different jobs I would be doing. I had entrepreneurial skills from a very early age, realized I could get more money out of some of the bosses I worked with if I did certain things or just always looking for an angle. And so it was difficult for me to even think about doing anything other than something manual. And then it must have been about 1870. Yeah, it must have been 1979, something like that. I was about 16 and I did something naughty. I shouldn't have done. I stole something and I got pulled in by the police. And the police said to me, look, you can go this way, you can go that way. It's up to you. I might have been a bit older than that. And he said, the path is really simple. That way leads to prison. That way leads to a good life. He said, and he let me off. I didn't get a record for it. And he realised that I'd had a pretty rough upbringing. My mum died when I was 3. I had a pretty nasty stepmother. And with the dyslexia, I just felt the world owed me something. The world was against me. It was ridiculous. And then that changed my attitude towards life, and I settled down. And then I got to about 23 years old, and I realised that my mother died when she was 23. So I'd lived longer than my mother had at 23 years of age. And I thought, that's it. I can't take mediocrity any longer. I'm going to do something about this. And I bought a flat in Walthamstow in East London. And when I was buying the flat, I was watching the agents, and I've got a really simple mantra in life. I was watching the guy thinking I could do that. And so I badgered him for a job, and he's going, look, we haven't got any jobs. And he thought I was a bit of a thicko, really. And I just kept on badgering and badgering. About 9 months later, I landed up getting a job in the estate agents. And that was my first taste into a different world, completely different world.
Going from
And then
bakery, where it's quite manual, then to more like office based, paper
that's it.
based, like
And,
writing. How do you navigate
and
that, right?
that was really difficult. And within the first couple of weeks that I was there, I had to fill a form in. And we used to have a morning meeting every morning. There was about 10 staff in the office. And he said, look, make sure you fill this form in. Don't get the client to fill it in. I filled the form in, and it looked like a spider had crawled out the ink pot and walked over the page. It was that bad. And he tore it up in front of all the staff and gave it back to me. He said, go and do it again. And it was so humiliating that I think I didn't walk out, but there was a problem. They realised I couldn't read and write properly, and the man who gave me the job, the area manager, said to me, "Why didn't you tell me?" And I said, "But would you give me the job?" And he went, "Probably not." I said, "Well, I'm in here now," and I managed to find ways around it. So we used to use a dictaphone, so I got me round having to write things. I used a dictaphone, and I could read, but didn't read very well. And you didn't really need to read too much, but I was very expressive. That was the difference. Even that dyslexia brain of mine enables me to compensate for not being able to write or read properly. So I was very expressive. I was good with words. And so I used a dictaphone. So if we needed anything there. And another way I used to do for handwriting was I'd get a ruler and write on the ruler to make it nice and neat at the time. Otherwise it was pretty bad. So I got round it. It was not easy. It was pretty horrendous, really, when I think back at it. And I nearly left quite a few times in that first year. I stuck by it, I stuck to it. But that period changed my life. I went from thinking I'd be stuck in being a baker for the rest of my life to there was a big, different, wide world out there. And it didn't take me long I got quite a few people approaching me, developers they were at the time, property developers, offering to support me and say, look, why don't you come and work with us? Why don't you? So I was always getting opportunities that I could have taken earlier, but I wasn't ready. And I always had that chip on my shoulder and that in my ear, you're not clever enough, you're a bit thick. And so that does hold you back a little bit. And I think the biggest challenge I had in that first 10 years when I first went self-employed was I didn't do any bookwork. And for the first 3 years of self-employment, I had nothing. Just the tax man came calling and went, you owe us a lot of money. And that taught me a serious lesson that you rely on other people. Find someone who can do it for you, so so if I can't do it myself, I just delegate it. Find
Mm.
someone who can. I had a good accountant who got me out of it. It was touch and go, and that was probably my first real challenge in a business where I wasn't really business oriented. I was entrepreneurial, but I wasn't a businessman, if that made sense.
You were there like more like stacking up the deals, finding opportunities, negotiating, make things happen, but all the operational side obviously wasn't your forte. Yeah. Yeah.
Go away, go away.
But in a way, it's good because like being dyslexic and not be able to do those things. Like you said, you realize quite quick, well, 3 years, that you need to be supported by someone else to do all that. And there are so many business owners who just still doing everything themselves. Everything thing I can do better than myself, and I guess finding challenging to delegate to someone or trust to do it to the way. So you didn't have that choice, right? You had to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny because I think I'm a great believer, and I've had quite a few businesses, and I've done the same thing every time. You need to set up a structure and stuff like that, and I get that now. At the time I didn't have any idea what to do, but now I do. So if I start a new business or a new venture today, the first thing I'm doing, instead of going to the accountants, the solicitors, and doing all that, I test something because you really want to find out if your idea is going to work, if it's not going to work. Because what's the point in going doing lots of work to find out? And I see this happen with a lot of investors. They go and set up a limited company and they go to the accountants, they go to the solicitors, and they spend 3, 4, 5 grand setting everything up and don't even find a bloody deal. So I was really good at finding deals. So that was me. I'd go and find the business, test it. Oh, there it works. Great. Now we'll go and formulate and go and get all the other stuff done because, a business bank account's great, but if you've got no money to put in it, what's the point? I just couldn't see it. So I do shortcut a lot of things, and it'll put some of your listeners are going to probably think, oh my God, I couldn't live like that because there's a lot of uncertainty in that, but I can handle a lot of uncertainty. I'm that sort of person where, and I've got this fintech going, this prop tech going at the moment where we've got to test it before we do anything. Before we've set up a limited company, I'm not going to open a bank account until I test it. I'm not going to go to the accountants and all that sort of stuff and get all the legal stuff done until I've tested the see if it works. The proof of concept. So I'm a great believer in um, really doing something first before you actually set things up, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I kind of share the same thoughts because you don't sell what you want, you sell what's demand is, right? What people want, not what you want. And yeah, if you don't test, then the routes to failure are quite evident.
Well, they can be
Because
a lot higher, can't they? I always look at it. If you're going and setting everything up, and then the route to failure can be quite high. If you just test it first, it works. The route to failure is not going to. You just cut that right down.
Absolutely. And there are so many examples when like huge successful businesses done that, like even innocent smoothies. I know the co-founders and CEOs, they just created different smoothies and took the samples on markets and events and literally just ask people to taste different flavors and then, put them in different bins, realize which one was most popular before they even started the production or launched the business. No, totally I agree with you on that one. So, your story, right? So you went into entrepreneurship, realized that actually you can do it. You're really good at making deals and finding developers and putting all things together. You by this point also realize that actually you need an accountant, otherwise the taxman will come after you. Then what happens?
I think the thing is with business, and I've seen this a lot with people, is that um, you can have a good business, but sometimes, as you say, life throws you a lemon. And one of the first lemons I had in business was my wife got cancer, got cancer, and you don't prepare for that. You don't. Someone throws this at you, and that was a period in my life where I didn't know what to do. I thought she was going to die. I give her a 50% chance of survival, and throat cancer is really quite a bad one because the actual treatment is 10 times worse than the actual the cancer itself, because you're doing radiotherapy on your throat. She can't eat out of us. She has to be fed with a peg in her stomach, and it was horrendous, horrendous. And that time I didn't know what to do. All right, so there was a lot of emphasis towards looking after her, and that had a knock-on effect at the same time as the financial crisis was coming up. So we had a lot of some of the deals we bought were wrong. We lost money on them, and so I'm not paying attention to the business because I'm paying attention to my wife at the same time as the market's doing us, throwing us a lemon, right? And that caused some serious financial difficulties.
But it
And
must
a lot
be
of
like
people don't realise.
sorry, like I'm just trying to think, like if someone was in your position at that moment, realizing that your loved one has 50% of leaving, that must automatically create such a race of thoughts, right? Like so many thoughts, right? What was going through your head in that moment?
Um, I've always had a mantra because my mum died when I was three. That nothing can be as bad as losing your mum when you're a 3-year old, because you only have to look at a 3-year old and his mum, right, and what their relationship is like, so you can get an idea of what that must have been like. So I always had that mantra, and then when my wife was ill, then I'm thinking this is coming pretty close to it. There's not many things that happen that get the close to that. So the threat to me was like, come on, you've taken her, now you want to take my wife. These are the sort of things that I was going through my mind. I felt very aggrieved, like, why is this happening to her? But you have to dig down deep sometimes, because all these things got stacked upon themselves. And I didn't know how to handle it, but you have to find a way, because she needed my support. That's what she needed. And we'd literally just, when she got cancer, we'd already exchanged contracts on the house we're living in now that was being built. It was built at the time. So we had to complete it, right? So we've got that pressure as well. So all these things together, um, I'm thinking it's not fair. Um, what am I going to do? And there's a point at which everything changed. And I kicked myself and said, no, we're not going to do that. This is what we're going to do. And you just find the strength. You just have to, because life, I think it was Tony Robbins I went to see once. And he was doing one of his shows, and he said the quality of your life is in direct proportion to your ability to deal with bad news and adversity. We all get adversities. All of us do, right? All different types of adversities. And you get these issues, and the, your ability to deal with them is vital, vital. And I think, um, I'll go on to something else a bit later, but I've got a quote from my daughter who said, if anyone can take a crap situation and turn it into something worth fighting for, that's my dad. Because my kids saw me go through these sort of things and come out the other side stronger than I was before.
That's amazing example that you're setting to children. And it's something, being mum myself and being parent myself, I've got two boys, young boys. It's something that is on my mind. And I think my duty as a parent to teach them how to deal with adversity, not to get good grades at school, not to, whatever, like read and write, forget about all that. Like, you're an example, right? Like you said, you've got writing of 7 years old. at age 35, but it's how you deal with adversity, because that what ultimately makes your happiness. That's what will influence you taking actions and what type of actions you do take day to day. And for me, if I can teach them that, like, my job is done as mum. That's how I think.
Yeah, 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 get it. And I mean, the story doesn't finish there, unfortunately. And we get over that, right? We get over that, and then I'm
So she
flying.
had
I'm
a
really,
treatment and
yeah,
she
she's
managed
fine.
to beat the cancer.
She's alive today. If you met her, you would never know.
Wow.
There are signs you can tell, but you would never know off the cuff. I mean, she still suffers from the treatment that she had. It knocked out her saliva glands, and so that's difficult for her to swallow even today. But you'd never know. That was 20 years ago. And then we get through the financial crisis, come out the other side, and everything's changed. As a trader, I probably had the best years of my life after the financial crisis of 2008. Interest rates go through the floor. That enables us to buy a lot of properties selling into auction. And then I stumbled across a guy called Simon Zucci, who runs the PIM meetings, and up and that to that stage, this was 2010, and I'd done a good few hundred deals, maybe 300-400 deals at that stage. And I met him, and he's trying to convince me to come to one of his meetings, and I'm going, I didn't know this world of property investors and the buy to let world. I was just a trader selling to buy to let investors. I just knew they were buying stuff off of me. I didn't know there were sort of places where they networked. And then I met him, and he said to me, come along. And then he realized my experience. And then I realized that he had a platform that if I could go and talk at some of his meetings and describe what I did, that we could then probably get deals from some of them meetings. And that's the only reason why I started going. I'll be quite frank with you. And I realized that there was another business opportunity here, which was train investors. And if they haven't got the money for buying the deals themselves, we'd buy them. Right. So they become our sort of little networkers out there going looking for the deals. So we'd have little partnerships going with people. So I just realized that this was a great opportunity, hence the reason why I did the talks. And then I realized that in order to stamp my authority, I had to write a book. Now, this is a guy, dyslexic, right? Can't read and write properly. I developed coping skills by that stage and how to do. I mean, the great thing about modern technology is, whereas I used to read with a dictionary, today I don't read with a dictionary because I've got spell check or I just look up a word online. So I never get stumped by things nowadays. My reading's a lot better than it used to be, and my writing's more than adequate. So I decided to write a book. So in order to write the book, I needed to either handwrite it, which was never going to happen, right? Or I needed to learn to type. So there was a typing program you could get online at the time called Mavis Beacon's Learn to Type. And I literally practiced every single day on the keyboard for 6 months to teach myself the keyboard so I could learn. Now I got to 60 words a minute, sorry, 50 words a minute, but it got knocked back to 20 words a minute because of the mistakes I was making because the spelling was so bad. Right? So I'm seeing a sea of red on the screen. Now, when they teach you to type, they said, don't look at the keys, look at the screen. I can't look at the screen because there's so many mistakes, it puts me off, right? So I have to keep looking at the keys. But that enabled me then to, when I wrote the book, that I wrote it in 2 weeks because I practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced and practiced. To in the end, I knew where the keys were, typed away, and so I wrote my first book, which was Hustle Your Way to Property Success. I got it released. It sold well, but that was my authority. That was me stamping my authority, saying, "Look, this is who I am." And I did lots of talks. We did lots of training, and that's another business I set up from nothing. And it was it was a good business. I didn't, and the good thing is because I'd done so many deals, I wasn't one of these that had been on a course, done a few deals, then teach another course. I'd earned my stripes, as they say.
You did it.
And
So it's interesting how that one conversation with Simon Zucci influenced you to become public speaker, book author, and also create training platform. And like you said, enhance your business with more deals, more opportunities. It's remarkable, isn't it? So when we talk about life throwing lemons, sometimes it throws sugar as well, right?
yeah, well, it's interesting because I dismissed Simon quite rudely to start with. It's like, who's this guy? Got all these network meetings, and he's telling me about all. He's a very excitable fella, and he's bouncing all over the place. But as soon as we realised we had synergy, and this is important, I think this is really important. If anyone needs to take any sort of like takeaways from a conversation like this, I met him on the 7th of March 2010. We was at an event in London with a guy called Joseph McClendon III, who does a lot of work with Tony Robbins. So it was his event, and we met on the Sunday of the 7th. And I said to him, "Look, I'll call you." I took his number. I said, "I'll call you." I didn't call him on the Monday. I called him on the Tuesday. And we arranged to meet up in the April. This was in the March. We were going to meet up in the April. And he phoned me on Wednesday afternoon and he said, "What are you doing tomorrow night?" And I'd never had done a PowerPoint. I'd never done any organization. So I knew that I was really talking at some of his meetings in the future. So I had time to organize it. So this was on the Wednesday. He said, "What are you doing tomorrow night, Thursday, the 11th?" So I said, "Nothing." Why? He said, "Could you do a talk for me? Because someone's pulled out of an event in Watford. And I need someone to fill in for the 30-minute talk." And I'd never done any public speaking at that stage. I'd never done any present. I said, "Someone, I haven't got anything ready." He said, "Don't worry, just turn up and talk." Right. And that was it. Right. So I turned up and talked. And the point I'm trying to make is that when you see an opportunity, take the bloody thing, right? Because I saw the opportunity with Simon and thought, wow, that's a platform that I can jump on. He's already got the platform. He had 12 meetings at the time. He had the platform already there. So all I needed to do was link into what he'd already done. I didn't have to go and build my own network meetings and start from scratch. I could literally lock into what he had, and that's what I did. And so I had that first talk on the 11th. It went really well, and all I had was a piece of paper with a load of addresses on it, and it was a great. I was really pleased with the way it went, and that was it. That was my speaking career off from the start, literally from the Sunday to the Thursday, and I never looked back since. And it grew and it grew, and I remember thinking to myself, well, okay, so like doing Simon's meetings, I want to do every meeting I can find. And I put myself out there to every single person. Can I speak at your meeting? Can I speak? And before you know it, I was speaking at every network meeting across the country. And I built that audience really quickly. But I wouldn't rest on my laurels. I knew I had to put the work in. I couldn't just turn up and, I had to ring the people up. Can we come and speak at your meeting? This is who we are, blah, blah, blah.
Well, you came and spoke at my event, and you
Mm.
are such an engaging speaker. And when I seen you speak at other event, I thought I need Paul at my event because your story, how you are, you're so engaging. And I think, it's like now listening and finding out a bit more about you, like you said, I know it was academic, but are overcompensated by other skills. And certainly your skills is like people, connections, being personal, funny, humor, all those kind of things. And I think it's just like much made in heaven been waiting for you to become guest speaker in that moment. So it just totally makes sense for me that you just like went viral in that respect, right? With all the networking events. So that's incredible, right? Sometimes we just don't know what life is waiting for us. But like you said, take the opportunity, take the bloody opportunity and run with it. So you doing all this, traveling up and down the country, successful business. You just like obviously survived your wife's illness. Then I know that life didn't stop there, right? Lemons keep coming. So
Yeah. Yeah, you could say that. Yeah. Yeah. and the moment came in September 2012, and I was going through. I was away, and I got a phone call. My youngest, um, Zoe, she was Harry at the time, had made her first attempt to take her own life, and that was in the September 2012. And what I realised at that time was life is precious. I'm struggling at the moment, right? So just bear with me, because when I got the phone call, you just don't expect it. It's like, where did that come from? And she no showed she showed no signs of any anxiety or anything like that. And I thought, why? She was Harry at the time. Um, uh, uh, why does Harry want to take his own life? Anyways, he survived it, and then we got um, talking, and he said to me, look, I'm a man trapped in a woman's body, and I want to be known as Zoe. And that's quite difficult to deal with. During that period, over the next sort of 18 months, there was quite a few attempts, and I made a decision in 2014, early 15, to come away from the training, because I couldn't spend time away just in case we got another phone call. And I don't want to be 200 miles away. So she became my priority. And so I came away from public life, still trading. I was still doing my property business. And that's, so that really sort of like held me back for a while, because I just didn't want to, my family was more important. So, yeah, so that sort of paved to public speaking for a few years.
It's interesting how I think, like lots of business owners and entrepreneurs, struggling to find this work-life balance. And fun enough, initially you said the reason why I went into business is to have that work-life balance, to spend time with my kids. But very often we end up working all hours on earth and keep waiting for this golden time when I'll make it, and then I'll rest, and then I'll be spending time with my family, and then we'll be going on holidays, and then, all the time on earth. But sadly, time runs away so quick. And along the way, things like this can happen. And
It
how,
was a little bit different, because I did have that time. All right,
mm,
as an entrepreneur, I was very fortunate to spend a lot of time with my kids from when they were very young, right up to when they don't want to be around you anymore. You know, your kids get to a stage where, I want to do my own thing, and by the time they were 15, 16, that's when I got into the training arena. They was like in their teens. But my Zoe came out when she was 19. She was at university at the time. But we got her home and just tried to protect her, because that was the main thing. So she was 2000, when 2012 she was 19. So I'd had that wonderful time with them. And they'd been through, both my kids had been through university, and then they were going through, and Zoe going through that. And that's when I realized that, and I had that ability. I had that period 2010 to 2014 when I was out on the road a lot. But I didn't want to be on the road. I wanted to make sure that I was there for them, and especially my youngest. So that was the reason, the decision. Yeah. So that
so
was, but
that
I did
must,
have a lot of time. I had a lot of time.
yeah, that must have been quite tough, like you said, as a dad, right? Like, number one, having that phone call, that's the dreadest call that any parent can, think of. And number two, also like realizing your child is not happy because they're not happy in their own body. And also, like you said, you're quite straight thinker, like you traditional type of man, right? Thinking in terms of
Mm,
the
mm.
female, the male roles, whatever. And how do you navigate that? Like how do you even comprehend that?
It's a difficult one, and I, anyone that's been through it will understand. And some parents do suffer and get estranged from their kids at that time. My goal, because I'm very fortunate, because I've got something I'm working on called shifting paradigms, and that was a paradigm shift for me, which was, this isn't about me, this is about my kid, right? And we had a conversation, and she's, and she's funny because she said to me, I thought you would react differently than you did. I thought you'd want to take me to somewhere and try and convince me that this will be all right and we'll work on it, and, we'll have some therapy and we'll come out the other side and I'll be whole again. And and my goal purely at that stage was to accept her. And that was probably the best thing I could have done for her. Well, she did tell me afterwards that that was the best thing I could have done for her, because instead of trying to convince her this is wrong, instead of trying to convince her or stand in my ground and saying, look, I think you shouldn't do this. This is her life, right? And she was hell bent on, she went the whole hog. She went the whole transition. So she had the operation, the whole lot. And so I knew this. I knew she was really brave. She was 6'6" as well. So you've got to remember that, right? 6'6" and saying, I want to come out and be a woman. And I think when you realize that it's not about me, this is about her. I'd rather have a kid that was alive, that wanted to be who they wanted to be, than a dead son because I wouldn't accept them. So that was my main goal in my head, was to make sure I supported her in that respect. So it's that, but it's difficult. It is difficult.
So you said she was impressed with your reactions. So my question is, what was your reaction?
Acceptance, pure accept. I said, I don't care how you turn up. You'll always be my kid. I don't care what you want me to call you. You'll always be my kid. And that was that was the reaction that she didn't expect. She expected me to try and talk her out of it.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And that's, like you said, you mentioned something about paradigm shift, right? It's like came within you in order to recognize that's the only way forward, right? Like you can resist, you can talk her out of it. You could have navigated in so many different ways, but you decided to change yourself rather than changing someone else.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and I think that takes a lot of courage and also really strong mindset for sure. Um,
And unfortunately, it didn't end there. We had 10 years of her, being mentally mental illness, and eventually she had an operation, and unfortunately the operation didn't go according to plan. And then she eventually did succeed in taking her own life in 2022. And then I found myself in a very, very dark place. When your child is no longer there, you don't expect that. I can openly talk about it. It still hurts. It still rips me apart today. And I have good days and bad days. And they're and business makes no difference to me, really. I don't really, if I do business, I do business. If I don't, I don't. That's not, and I'm fortunate that my business enabled me to be able to take time out, just, just evaluate. Because there are times I didn't want to be here. Not, I didn't want to kill myself. I just didn't want to be here. And that was really difficult. And I had a good friend of mine, John Cox, who runs the Phoenix Property Meet. He used to run something called the Bucks Property Meet years ago. And he realised I was suffering. He was ringing me every day, and he said to me, "Look, you need to get back out there and do some talks." I went, "I don't want to do any talks. I really don't." He said, "No, you come alive when you're on stage." He said, "Come on." And he encouraged me slowly. It took him 6 months. and he got me out to Reading, and he did a little gig in Reading, and then we started building from there. It took time. It took me 18 months to sort of like get back to even get back. I probably to 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 sort of like get a clarity in what I wanted in life, because after I said to you earlier about the mantra of, I always looked at life and thought, well, can't be as bad as my mum. This was worse. This was worse. And it brought my mum's stuff up as well, because I'd never grieved for my mum because I was three. So I was grieving two people at the time. But anyway, I got through that, and then I made a decision in January 23, which is about 4 months after she passed, that I was going to ride from Reading, Canterbury, where she came out as Zoe, and where she died in Reading. So that was going to be a ride I was going to do in one day, which is 130 miles on my push bike. And I was going to do it on the anniversary of her death on the 3rd of October 23. And that was my stepping stone onto recovery. So I'd ride my bike every day to train for it, because I'm an avid bike rider. I'm an avid fitness. I don't do little things. I do tend to do big things. I'm an endurance cyclist. I do triathlons and stuff like that. So I was always fit. So off I went and trained for that. And then I did 100 life lessons. So every day for 100 days, I recorded a life lesson that I could look back on. That's part of my shift in paradigms. That's all on YouTube, by the way. So if anyone wants to find me on YouTube, Paul Ribbons, they can find me
Fantastic.
there.
So that was one of your way of coping strategy, like to
Yep.
set yourself
Yep.
100 days life challenge where you
That's
share
it.
your
Yeah.
life lessons every single
Yeah.
day over a period of 100
And
days.
every day I put it on a flip chart. I put a little yellow post-it note, little square ones. Every one for every day I posted on the flip chart for 100 days, until I did it, and then that was part of the recovery. And then within a short period, I'm not, but say I'd forgotten. I, I it eased the pain, right? Not forgotten the pain, but you eased the pain. And then um, one particular day, I was riding my bike, thinking I've got bad indigestion, and then I got taken to the doctors, and the doctors put me straight into the hospital and gave me angiogram, and I had coronary artery disease, and I had to have two stents fitted in my heart. And they worked out that my heart was, I had heart failure as well, but with normal ejection fraction. Which, so if anyone knows what heart failure is, it's the early stages of heart failure. So I had all these other health things that came up, which I think stemmed probably from that, and I had all that to deal with. And then and in my head was, I wanted to rebuild the training business, because I knew that I could not sit indoors, otherwise I would fester. I knew that, and that was the recovery phase. And then this year I wrote my second book, which is going to be published in May, which is called Watch the Score, and that's all about how I think about things. Because even, thinking about poor Zoe, when Harry, when she came in and said, "I want to be a woman trapped in a man's body," I'm automatically thinking, so what does this mean? What's the score here? Well, you realise that your kid's vulnerable, and you've got to adapt. Otherwise, it could be quite disastrous. So I'm always looking at what's going on. So whether it's the market, whether it's something personal, whether it's a new business. So where do we stand? What's the score? That's the question I ask myself. And then I can evaluate from there. And that's what the book's about. It's all these little things that have happened to me throughout my life, and and how I've dealt with them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I can't wait for your book. And what's the score? It's interesting. One of my guests was US military soldier in a Marine. And one of the lessons they, or like one of the principles they learn when they, let's say, if you in the woods by yourself, got dropped, like there is nothing around you, don't have any tools. There is a acronym they use life, and one of the life principles is inventory. What's the score, right? What's around you? What do you have? Like you've got jacket, you've got knife. Do you know like what's and you practically doing the same, right? What's the situation? Where we at? What we've got to deal with, right? What we can work with. Yeah, that's remarkable. And I'm so sorry to hear, number one, about your losses. It's, yeah, I can't even imagine, like you facing losing ultimately three very close people in your life, right? Like you said, after very young experience of losing your mom at 3, you thought that can be worse. Life can be worse, right? But it was challenging you and testing you and keep throwing those lemons at you. But like you said, your kid said about our dad. If anyone can deal with adversities, will be our dad, and true example of that. But
Well, she wrote that in her letter, the last letter to me. And that's what she wrote in there. She said anyone could take a crap situation, might, turn it into something worth fighting for. That's my dad. Because she knew I'd cope with this. She knew I would. She knew it'd hurt me. And so it was utilized. And I used to literally walk every day and shout in my head, repeat that saying over and over and over and over and over again. I mean, I'm getting quite emotional thinking about it because it got me through. It got me through that she knew, right? Even though what she was doing, she was taking her own life, but she knew her dad would come through it because that's what I do. I've always done that. I've always found a way through something and found something that means, and it's one of my life lessons is that if something happens to you, you have to find the meaning in it. And also what's the upside? Because what's the upside of your daughter dying? I mean, goodness sake, there's no upside, but you have to find something positive about that. And that was that mantra of hers, that letter I had from her, the little things that she did. She was very, very organized with what she did. And so I take solace from that, uh, and realized, and I didn't realize this. I did not realize until she passed what I meant to her. Because as parents, we don't see that. We Our kids moan
mm,
at us and groan at us and, especially teenage kids. When they're younger, we have very different relationships until when they get older. Now, some of us have great relationships all the way through. You don't get any breakages through that time. But her that period of that 10 years was very fraught with all of her family because she was asking us to do something which is completely against the natural order of things. And she knew that she was asking a lot from us, but she was struggling. My job is to find a way through that, not she's being awkward or she's a pain in the ass. I had to meet her where she was and know that I could have easily butted up against her, easily done that. And that wasn't, and I take a lot of wisdom from a guy called Stephen Covey.
mhm.
And he talks about in one of his habits of highly successful people is, seek first to understand before being understood. So before I make put my point across, I want to understand what it's like for somebody else, and that stood me in great stead.
I love that principle. I love that principle. And like also like what you said is you shifted and frame your mind that I want to have acceptance whatever the situation is, and then see how I can deal with it rather than deal with it and then whether acceptance will come or not. um and yeah, there is definitely power in that. And so a lot has happened for you, Paul, and it's still happening, right? It's not over. Like you said, you're facing your own health conditions. Um, but you, right? You said you wrote a book, or you're just about to finish it, the
Now, I've,
second.
I've finished the book. It's being edited as we speak, and it'll be out probably in May. I think it is. We're talking about releasing it in May. I've got to make some adjustments, but it's actually finished. So it's a finished manuscript.
So, you said I always found the ways, I always found the strength. And for all of our listeners and viewers, I can just imagine them saying, how do you find strength? How do you find that wisdom? What do you do?
I think it's stripping things back to basics, right? Yeah, when I say what I mean by that is that's that what's the score scenario. That's a survival instinct, really. That's what that is. It came from a kid where you know, I wasn't looked after, yeah, as a child. I had no guidance as a child. But it's understanding nothing lasts forever, all right? And there's old sayings you hear, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger and stuff like that. And there's a lot to be said about that, right? Um, and I think you have to have an idea because losing Zoe could have crushed me, but I've got another child, I've got a wife, I've got other family. So me capitulating is not in question. I did for a while. I felt sorry for myself. I did, and I did. I, I was not in a good place. I was not in a good place at all. And I think anyone that's lost a child could probably say the same thing. But I knew there would be light at the end of the tunnel somewhere. And I had faith in that, and I had faith in me that I would find the answer. I would scrape, claw my way out of it, some way, shape, or form, because I didn't want to be in that place for too long. And I think it's having that belief inside you that everything will turn out. It's never going to be the same, right? I mean, I've lost my kids. It's never going to be the same. But I've got a granddaughter. I've got a grandson, and so I can give my time to them, and I think that's important to realise that there's other things around you, and the thing that you see in front of you. Uh, Sometimes you have to take a step back and realise that because it can consume you if you're not careful.
Absolutely. No, I love, I guess, like your tools, right? Or mantras, like you said, what doesn't
Mm,
kill you make you stronger for sure, because what's the worst can happen is your own death, right? In all this. Um,
mm, mm.
that's ultimately is, but we need to carry on. Otherwise you're going to be living miserable life for how long? We don't know how long we've got in front of us. And also, like you said, just yeah, focusing that it's not going to last forever. Like you said, you miss your daughter dearly, and life is not the same, but life does carries on.
Yeah. Mm.
Recognizing that, yeah, I love that. Um, that's quite, I guess, like simple things that we hear all the time, but by applying them in your life, certainly can help you. So your book now, that you about to publish, tell us more about that. What's the name? Because I know it's not business book, right? Surprise, surprise. So the
Well,
first,
it tracks my entrepreneurial life from a very early age, from a kid at school and the things I was doing, and I was always looking at maximizing something or because it started off as a necessity. Because when I was a kid, I didn't have things. I was denied things deliberately. My stepbrother got everything he wanted, but we weren't allowed. Me and my sisters weren't allowed stuff, so we found ways to get it, right? And it sort of tracks that sort of same mentality from getting them jobs. I used to have I think one stage I had 4 jobs whilst I was still at school. Paid 2 paper rounds. I'd have a paraffin round, and I had I used to do the stalls down the market as well. So I was always doing something. I couldn't help it. And I do remember, you know, getting things for people, meeting some demand somewhere and finding something to do. So it tracks that. It tracks how I got out of the baking trade into a state agency and the things I did, because I make it sound, when you talk about it and I say something like this, it's very easy to skip over some really important parts that drove that behavior and got me to the jobs in the first place. And bearing in mind, I worked in a state agency in the 1980s when it was really good, and in the 1990s when it wasn't. I mean, we think we've got things bad, interest rates the way they are at the moment, but I was selling houses when interest rates, the base rate topped 15%, the base rate, right? So when I think back at, I was always good at selling houses, even during a recession, and going self-employed as well. Thinking I never had, uh, friends of mine come to me, and I got lots of personal clients where I deal with, on a one-to-one basis, where they come to me and they can't think straight. So that I talked about shifting paradigms. And I'd ask them a question. So, so what's the worst that's going to happen here? You're going to go bust. That's the worst scenario, right? So let's get that out of the quest. Let's get out of the way, right? That's the worst. So we've accepted that's the worst, because that's sometimes what you have to do. Accept the worst. And then we can then look at, so what can we do about it? And that's what I tend to do with people. And I do that with myself. And that's what the book's about is I look at, okay, the worst scenario is this. So what can we do about it? So we now know, accept that. And so we then look for solutions. And I was really good at that. I was just, understanding that you can start anything from nothing, right? You don't need pots of money. But it's what you do and how you build. And there's two things I think that people in property have a problem with is one, they can't find the deals in the first place. And the second thing, they can't get the money. Well, I've never had a problem with either. So because I have this mentality is there's plenty of deals out there. And I remember, it's funny, I go back many, many years and a developer said to me when I was an agent, there won't be deals around forever because it's going to get to a stage where all the houses are modernised. Now, if you took that statement as, it sounds logical, doesn't it? Once you've modernised all the houses, there'll be no unmodernised houses left. Well, a house that was modernised in the 1960s is not modernised in the 2026. A house that was modernised in the 1980s is not modernised compared to. So you're always going to have houses that need modernisation. So I actually flipped it and went, actually, I disagree with that. I think there's always going to be a volume of houses that are going to need modernisation, because who knows where we're going in the next 10 years and what our houses will have in 10 years' time. If I talked about wiring a house in the 1980s compared to the wiring today, very different.
Absolutely. I love that. And now I understand the title of the book. What's the score, right? What's the score?
So come on. So where are we? So and that's important. It's really important. I can't stress that.
I love that. Well, I can't wait to read your book. And for listeners and watchers, where can we find it once it's out?
Well, it'll be available. I think most of the time we was going to put it on Amazon. I'm not sure we'd throw it on Amazon to start with. Probably get it from me direct, because I think the idea would be that we'll probably do some other things. Just not just the book itself. So I'll let you have a link as and when it's ready. You can connect with me on paulribbons.com or Paul Ribbons on YouTube, because that's probably going to be my platform where I'll put a lot of the content out.
So, Paul, for someone who's been in entrepreneurship like over 40 years now, I'm just so curious to find out what's your goals for the future, right? What you haven't accomplished and haven't achieved that you still desire and want to do. What the future holds for you.
Well, at the moment, we're working on numerous projects, and one of them is a prop tech company. And I can't say anything about it until it's released, but it will be an app. My goal on that app is to release it, get it ready, get it built up, and then to exit, just to get it probably a company acquisition, someone to buy us or something like that. So that's a little goal of mine for the future, and so I'm really excited. And it's funny because my daughter Zoe, she was a software engineer, and I came up with the idea while she was still alive, and she was going to write all the software. So for a long time, I didn't want to do anything without her. But now I've accepted. Actually, no, I want to do it for her. I want it in her memory. So we're about to build that, and we'll be going for funding as well with seed funding. We've got what they something called an SEIS, which is a tax efficient way for investors to be able to invest in the app. So that's something we're really looking forward to doing in the next 18 months.
Fantastic. I wish you every success, and I can't wait
Thank you.
to find out more about the secret app that you're creating. And just to close our conversation, I always ask my guests if there was an advice to younger version of yourself looking back, what that advice would have been.
To me, my younger self,
Mm,
I think I would have told myself to believe in myself earlier. Because if I'd have believed in myself earlier, I started earlier, and I would have probably really accelerated very quickly. Because there were people that were approaching me when I was an estate agent to set up an estate agents when we could have done that in the 1980s, and I didn't have the confidence to do that. So I would have slapped myself today and said, for goodness sake, go and do it. Because even if you fail it, right? Even if you would have had the experience, and I think this is the thing. This is one thing I took away from my entrepreneurship. Right, I'm not employable. I am not employable. I was a really bad employee, but I'm a great business owner, and that's the difference.
fantastic. Love that. And it's again links back to what you said, grab the bloody damn opportunity when it comes. Brilliant. Well, thank you so much. And as you heard Paul's stories, when lemons come at your way, there is always way to fight them, to get your mindset in order, shift your paradigm, and carry on. No matter what. So, Paul, thank you so much for sharing your story and being present with us. And I wish you every success in the next 40 years of your professional career.
Thank you very much indeed. It's been a pleasure.